These are the 4 rules to deal with your most powerful ally, your queen. I'm Grandmaster Igor Smirnov, and let's go ahead and get started. You've probably heard the rule, ladies first, but nowadays some ladies find that to be disempowering or discriminating, and therefore to keep everyone happy, we're gonna flip the rule to ladies last. How would you play as white here in this position? Black has just brought their queen out, and now your pawn on g2 is hanging. Most players would probably defend it one way or the other, for example by playing queen to f3. However, why do we have this rule that a queen should not be developed early in the game? In fact, the correct rule would be the opposite, to develop the queen last of all. It's because the queen, by definition, is the strongest piece, therefore it can be attacked by any other piece or pawn on the chessboard, making it extremely vulnerable. Therefore, it's advised not to develop the queen early, because otherwise your opponent can gain tempos by attacking the queen. Therefore, for white, it's much stronger not to defend this pawn anyhow, but instead to capitalize on that advantage and to keep gaining tempos hitting the queen. Now, if black goes forward and grabs the pawn, attacks your rook, you can gain one more tempo, this time bringing the rook into play. The queen still needs to move, and now you already have a little combo. It's bishop takes f7. Nice little tactical shot. It turns out that black can't capture the bishop because of this fork, and the cheeky queen is gone. What if your opponent realized the danger and did not take the bishop? What if they just moved the king away? Well, you're gonna make use of the same idea, just keep gaining tempos hitting the queen. This time you can advance your rook, hit the queen, the only available square is now queen h6, then you've got one more attacking move, d4, with your sniper from c1. Now the queen still needs to move, and if the queen goes here trying to harass this bishop, you've got a counter-strike bishop g5, which illustrates clearly why the queen should be developed last of all. You may be wondering, Igor, it's all good, but I know some theoretical opening variations where one side develops a queen early. Well, that usually happens for one of the 2 reasons. Either your opponent does something which makes it impossible for them to attack your queen. For instance, here in the Alpin variation, you can go d5, hit in the center, and indeed develop your queen early, because this pawn on c3 obstructs development of the knight, and therefore they can't attack your queen and gain tempos that way. The second reason is, of course, a lot more exciting, specific tactical benefits. In this game between 2 grandmasters, Kurganidze against Kotov, white went for the closed variation of the Sicilian defense, black attacked in the center, but instead of recapturing, all of a sudden they jumped with their knight forward, threatening this cozy checkmate after knight to f3. White covered, but black played bishop g4, putting even more pressure. Now, I realized that right now the knight is guarded, so it's not a problem. He decided to just continue his development, and black played knight takes d5, sacrificing the knight. At this point, the knight cannot be captured by this knight, because that would drop the other one on e2, and white will be in trouble, so he captured it by the bishop. But then, black came up with the early queen development. Queen takes d5, sacrificing the queen, attacking this rook in the corner, and white cannot accept it because of this forcing checkmate. And here's a little tactical quiz for you. What if white realizes that they can't take the queen and instead they just castle? Well, the first move is pretty clear. You need to deliver this check, but how about king to h1? How do you finish black's attack at this point? Please think about this and write it down in comments below. Being a royal comes with a lot of privileges, but also there is a long list of rules and restrictions. One of them is to avoid PDA, public display of affection. White has just played queen to b3, attacking this pawn on f7. What would you play here as black? Most players realizes that they need to guard this pawn on f7, and therefore they play queen e7, which is a deadly mistake. Here's the thing. Originally, your king and queen stand together. However, it is actually better to keep them separate, as otherwise it provides dangerous opportunities to their enemies. Now I can play knight takes c3, threatening knight to d5. If black thinks, okay, let me trade it off, now they need to guard this pawn. After the knight comes out, white goes bishop a3, and that starts feeling unpleasant. The queen needs to move, but there aren't many squares to go to, and if it just goes back, after that the king cannot castle anymore. Therefore it feels like black should play d6, but now white can capitalize on the fact that the king and queen stand on the same file and break open the center with pawn to e5, hitting the knight, hitting the pawn. Now the pawn can't capture because it's pinned. Even if instead black captures with the knight, then after this trade, white simply goes rook e1 and win the game thanks to this pin. Back to the starting position, all that trouble would not happen if black would keep their king and queen a bit separate. If instead of playing queen e7, they would play queen to f6, now there would be no threats along the e-file, and black would be able to play knight e7, castle, and the game goes on. If white ever goes e5, the queen can slide over here, and then black keeps playing normal chess. Avoiding PDA is usually not a problem though. While a sluggish king stays in his castle, a queen plays around. Which brings us to the next rule: a queen's place is in the home rank. I took this position from a real game between Wesley So playing white against Yusupenko playing black. What are the best positions for the queens? Let's think about that. How about the white queen? Well, the rule states that the best positions are central squares of the home rank, these three. And for black it would be similar, they just don't have this square available, therefore it would be only two options. Why we're talking about just those squares? Well, if the queen comes forward, it's easy for your opponent to attack it and again gain tempos. Similarly, if the queen went right here, black would also be able to take advantage of this in different ways. For example, to play bishop d7, setting it up for different discovered attacks, or maybe play a6 and b5 in the long run. Either way, that position is more exposed and more dangerous. Therefore, white needs to pick between one of the safe squares of the home rank. For black, it's pretty much the same. Either this square or this one. Of course, you don't want to block your bishop by going here, so you first develop the bishop and then play queen d7 or queen e7. So that is what we can expect from both queens. Now, let's make a couple more moves. Let's see how the game progresses. I'm not focusing on these moves, let's just focus on queens and see what both sides are going to do with them after some trades. Ultimately, black developed the queen to the e7, one of those squares, and white does the same. Now, both squares are safe, and after that, the game goes on. Now we've got the second most played opening, the Queen's Gambit. This is taken from the game between Magnus Carlsen playing white against Andrew Tam playing black. It is white to move. So where should the queen go? I guess it's pretty obvious by now. The central squares of the home rank, right? So we're picking one of these squares. Even then, we still need to be careful and keep in mind our opponent's opportunities. For instance, if you bring the queen right here, that follows the rule. However, your opponent can still attack the queen by going knight to e4, hitting the queen this way. And if you trade off on e4, then the pawn relocates right here and hits your knight, so that is still a little bit uncomfortable. Therefore, queen d2 is still not the safest spot. Now, how about queen to c2? At first, this looks like a good idea, but here's the problem. At some point in the future, this file may become open, and you certainly do not wish to keep your queen on an open file, as your opponent's rook can attack it. For instance, if black trades and decides to open up the c file somehow, then after all these trades, at some point, this opposition may become unpleasant. And as the bishop drops back, let's say black goes here, and now black starts capitalizing on this pressure, putting pressure to the c3 knight. Black wants to capture it and disrupt white's pawn chain, or maybe go knight b4 and hit the queen and bishop, and overall this situation is unpleasant. By now we can play as good as Magnus, so he played queen e2, picking that central square of the home rank, which is also safe. What should black do? Well, for black it's a little tricky, because these both squares are actually already taken. Therefore, for black it's actually an issue how to develop their queen. Andrew played knight e4, hoping for the straight, which would automatically put the queen to the right place. However, Carlsen decided to prevent this and played bishop g3. To be clear, the only purpose of that move was just to avoid development of black's queen. Because typically a bishop is a bit stronger than a knight, therefore in general this straight favors black a little bit. However, they still got stuck with this queen, not sure where to put it, and later white won the game because black can't develop the queen comfortably and because he's Magnus. Which piece delivers most checkmates? I know that quite many of you guys are developers, and one of your curious colleagues figured it out. He used public API of Chess.com to calculate that, for example, for Alireza Firouzja, most of the checkmates, the majority of them, 61%, were delivered by a queen. Which brings us to the next point. The queen is good for checkmating, which means that if you plan to go out there and do something cool, bring in your queen. She loves to have a blast. Now, the black king is vulnerable, it's exposed, but how do we finalize the game? In this game, Anand, who played white, played queen to b4, bringing the queen into the attack. And you can see that immediately it creates a ton of threats. If we only imagine these two knights to be traded off, after this we'll have queen e7 checkmating threat together with the bishop, or maybe some queen to f8 checkmates, some stuff like that. In the game, however, black player Sokolov played queen h6, check. He tries to be also tricky. Now he moves this knight away, and he's trying to complicate matters for Anand, but still Anand goes knight a6. A beautiful knight sacrifice, Now, the rook can counter it, but the problem is after this, we've got queen to e7 checkmate. Again, the queen is good for mating. So, black needs to do something. And in the game, black countered this threat by playing queen takes h4. Now there is no queen e7 checkmate, as there is no bishop right there to support that. Anyways, white played queen to f8 check. It's almost a checkmate, but not yet. And after king d7, white delivered this checkmate by a knight, which ruins my point a little bit, but still, you get the idea. In this example, Garry Kasparov is playing white and pawns are moving up, therefore it's pretty easy to win the game. Garry plays pawn e8, promotes, after this black captures, and now Garry wanted to promote this pawn to a queen, but a queen changed her mind on the go, and Garry had to promote it to a knight. Still black resigned because of knight to g6 checkmate. Now, although these guys keep ruining my point, in most cases a checkmate is delivered by a queen. And if you'd like to know the main plan that Garry Kasparov keeps using to punish his opponents who tries to pin his knights, check out this video. If you want to have my complete blueprint for your chess improvement, head to the free masterclass right there. Either way, have a great rest of the day, and I'll talk to you soon.